Let's begin by discussing the Health and Human Resources mandate that was recently issued. Clearly, it puts the church in a difficult position.
Yes.
It mandates that the church and its insurance coverage provide various forms of contraceptives. Talk first about why that's a problem for the Catholic Church.
Well, it's not just contraceptives, it's sterilization, it's abortifacient drugs, but even if it were, let's say, drugs to have someone kill himself, assisted suicide drugs, it would be the same issue. So it's deceptive to say that this is a contraceptive issue in itself. That happens to be the drug we're concerned about. But there are other issues that are moral that we shouldn't have to support by payment or by doing them. And that's the line that's been crossed with these new regulations. So if we could just go back to where we were a couple months ago when we were free to insure ourselves according to our own institutional conscience, everything would be fine. But the problem now is to figure out how to get back to that place where we were, not only a few months ago, but for our whole history as far as we know. In other words, as we understand it, and I think most people understood it until a few months ago, the First Amendment says that religion as such is protected, including churches, not just individual believers, which means that an institutional conscience, the teaching of the church in this case that governs Catholic hospitals, that governs Catholic universities, that governs Catholic social services, has to be respected by governmental orders and decrees. And we've always had that by conscience clauses and exceptions that are in the law. The Hyde Amendment was a case in point. The Weldon, the Church Amendments that protected conscience were always in our federal laws. They were deliberately taken out of the health reform law, and we had asked for them to be put in. And they said that they would cover them through the regulations. Well, they haven't covered it through the regulations. This does not respect institutional conscience. And that's become very clear in the discussion. Although it's obfuscated, it's been made more confusing than it has to be. But the point is simply, should the federal government now, against our whole history, be allowed to tell a religious institution and religious people what it must pay for when what they're asking them to pay for is against their conscience?
Yeah. A recent poll reported that 72% of Americans think that this mandate violates the Constitution. The administration offered what they labeled as a compromise. Do you feel that that offer helped the situation at all, or does it really leave us where we started?
It leaves us where we started, because when they filed the regulations, they said they are unchanged. And what they offered was a year to figure out, as Cardinal Dolan said so well, how we're going to violate our conscience. But in fact, you are paying for a policy that within the policy says we're going to have to pay for these things. You don't have to tell the woman or man who is insured the contents, but you're still paying for it.
For some years, I've heard you speaking about this downward slide in our religious freedom, in the exercise of our freedom, and the diminishment of religion's role within the public square. Some people thought you were a bit of an alarmist when you first started to talk about this, but you've turned out to be a true prophet.
Thank you. I like to think so.
What were some of the danger signs that you've been seeing for years that others apparently were missing?
Well, we have now a situation that is new in the last 20 years, say, where a religious culture, was mostly Protestant, but nonetheless religious, biblical, has been secularizing itself. And you can see it particularly in many of the decisions of the Supreme Court. There can be no prayer in public schools. There can be no public manifestation of God. And so that's called secularism as an ideology. It means to live as if God did not exist. You don't deny that there's a God, you just don't pay attention to him in public. You can do what you want in private, but in public you have to live as if God did not exist. Well, the church's business is to be not just a private club, but a public institution that reminds people that God does exist. And so again and again, whenever we reminded people about this, resentments are born by people who want to live as if God did not exist, as if they were the sole arbiters about what is right and wrong, as if individually they had the right to do whatever they want without any kind of religious or other sort of restrictions. So there's a lot of resentment against the church. I saw that building, and it frightens me. And sometimes I have, said things that could be looked at, as extreme, if you like. But sometimes to wake people up, you have to say something in a rather unnuanced way. But I'm sorry at times, but nonetheless, I think what I've been pointing to is now a case in point, and it's going to get much larger, much greater, depending on what the courts do with this, or depending finally upon what elected legislators do with this.